Welcome from the studios of KPBS TV in San Diego, California. We are reaching you live through a unique and complex international telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. The International Training Center at San Diego State University brings us all together in this video conference, which joins distinguished organizations located in Mexico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, Spain, the United States of America, and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, in Geneva, Switzerland. Welcome to our program, Visioning Through Scenarios and Intuition, an essential strategy for organizational success. This is the 9th video conference in the series Foundations for Prosperity in the Third Millennium. My name is Richard Page, and I will be your moderator for today's program. I'm a private attorney in San Diego with the Page firm, practicing in the areas of business and international litigation, including arbitration and mediation. Today's program is composed of 3 presentation modules and 2 question and answer sessions. We look forward to your live participation. One of the basic reasons to think about the future is to prepare for change. Our prosperity in the third millennium will be at serious risk if we don't systematize and enrich this futuristic process as individuals, organizations, and communities. A widely used technique today, visioning through scenarios, was first proposed by M. Mesarovic and E. Pestel of the Club of Rome in 1971 as an approach to systematically identify and evaluate alternative future possibilities. Visioning is not equivalent to simply projecting or miraculously predicting. It should be a continuous process that will help us adapt and evolve in an increasingly complex global reality. It will be a test for our survival. This strategic video conference will review the basic concepts of visioning and will present the methodology and techniques for scenario development and analysis. The invited speakers will also propose basic rules of how to think like a futurist and the role intuition and foresight can play in strengthening our capacity to envision and create our preferred futures. It is a pleasure to introduce to you today's expert speakers, Dr. Peter Bishop, Dr. Thomas L. Hoffmann, and Dr. Roger Frantz. Dr. Peter Bishop is an associate professor of human sciences at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. He currently chairs and teaches courses in the graduate program in Studies of the Future. He specializes in long-term forecasting and planning, focusing on the future of information technology and technology transfer. He also facilitates groups in developing scenarios and strategic plans for the future. Dr. Bishop is currently serving as the Executive Director of the Institute for Futures Research and as the Planning and Evaluation Officer for NASA's Mid-Continent Technology Transfer Center. He also consults with several major U.S. corporations. Dr. Bishop's previous experience includes serving as the Director of the Space Business Research Center and working at the NASA Johnson Space Center. Dr. Bishop holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy from St. Louis University and a master's and doctoral degrees in sociology from Michigan State University. Dr. Thomas Hoffmann is the Director of Human Resources for Golder Associates Corporation, a consulting firm based in Calgary, Canada, with 75 offices in 130 different countries, including Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Peru. Dr. Hoffmann is also managing principal of Value E Squared Inc., a management consulting firm. He works with Golder Associates worldwide and with Fortune 500 company leadership teams in understanding those organizational characteristics which will lead to higher levels of employee contribution, performance, and satisfaction. Since 1996, Dr. Hoffmann has worked with companies in North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific. Dr. Hoffmann was previously a director of quality at AT&T's Western region. He has also been a guest professor at Estonia Business School in Tallinn, Estonia, since 1992. Dr. Roger Frantz is a professor of economics at San Diego State University. He also serves as director of the university's annual Intuition 2000 conference, having held workshops on intuition for over 10 years. Dr. Frantz's interest in the field began when he started a daily meditation practice in 1970. He has worked as a consultant to a number of internationally recognized firms and for the Small Business Development Center's San Diego branch. Dr. Frantz, who holds a Ph.D. in economics from Washington State University, is the author of the book X Efficiency, Theory, Evidence, and Applications. He is co-editor of the book Intuition at Work, Pathways to Unlimited Possibilities, a collection of essays by a number of experts in the field of intuition, and of the Handbook of Behavioral Economics. Welcome, gentlemen. Let us begin with an introductory question. What advice would you give to traditionally minded professionals who value concrete and tangible assets about how they should deal with the increasing intangibility of the new technologies and the global economy? Dr. Bishop.
The premise is that the new technology is providing us a challenge because as opposed to previous technologies which allowed us to use oil and transportation and manufacturing to produce economic value, now we're having to produce value in a place called cyberspace, a place where intangibles exist, knowledge and expertise, process and currency. Basically, people growing up in a world of tangibility have a difficult time imagining value in that, and my advice is to let the young people do it. We set the goals, set the outcomes and the objectives, but for young people this is their world, and they will be better at creating that value than we ever would.
Dr. Hoffmann?
As we produce our products and our services for our clients and customers, the real value is the value which is perceived by them. And most of that is intellectual or non-tangible. So a way of looking at it is asking ourselves a different set of questions around the products and services that we produce. What is the experience that our clients are having or our customers are having utilizing our services, and how are they translating that into value which is intangible? So it allows us to see our tangible assets in an intangible way.
Dr. Frantz.
I would remind people of two things. Number one is that the mind is mostly intangible in the sense that it's unconscious. And secondly, that the majority of the money supply in the world is intangible. It's simply numbers on a piece of paper, and it has been so for at least 30 years and probably 50 years or more. So how do you deal with intangible technology? Well, how do you come up with good ideas mostly from your intangible mind? And how do you use mostly intangible money to run organizations successfully?
Thank you for your comments. Let us begin with Module 1, in which Dr. Bishop will describe visioning and the role of imagination.
One doesn't need to be a futurist to see that the world is moving rapidly to something called the global economy. What is the global economy? First of all, the notion of a global economy is not new. Early economies have traded with each other as far back as the beginning of written history. And some of the first applications of written language were trading records, bills of lading, shipping labels, and so forth. Most empires of the world have depended on world trade the last being the British Empire of the 19th century. In fact, the proportion of the world's gross national product that is devoted to international trade is now only getting back to what it was in 1900, before the protectionist policies of the 20th century. But of course, the volume of trade is orders of magnitudes larger. The existence of the global economy is not new, but the manner in which we are pursuing the global economy today is brand new. The difference is the existence of long-distance, high-speed telecommunication networks. Most importantly, the Internet. What difference does the Internet make? Previous technology shrank the world and permitted more rapid communications between distant places. Sailing ships, railroads, telephone, jet aircraft. What they could not do, however, was to eliminate time and distance completely. But that is exactly what modern telecommunications does. At the limit, information and services can be delivered instantaneously and simultaneously anywhere in the world. While it will still take people and goods time to move around the world, the new products and the new industries are everywhere at once, or nowhere at once, depending on where you think cyberspace is. So we are moving from an international economy, one in which countries traded with each other, to a global economy where trade takes no account of national borders or political entities at all. I hurry to say that we are not there yet. We still have a long way to go. But we are close enough that the change that has happened so far is having profound effects on business and other organizations. Before we discuss the role of vision in this global economy, we have to take a little side trip to the nature of change. Change comes in two varieties, continuous and discontinuous. Continuous change, sometimes called incremental change, happens all the time. It is the slow movement of trends from one level to another, like the growth of the world's population or its economy. Discontinuous change, also called transformational change, happens in episodes and only once in a while. It is the sudden shift from one era to another. As opposed to continuous change, discontinuous change transforms the whole system. We may say that it is a brand new ballgame. Combining these two types of change, we get a picture of change over long periods of time, sometimes called punctuated equilibrium. The equilibrium periods are the relatively long times of continuous incremental change. The punctuations are the abrupt changes of discontinuous transformational change in between. Charles Darwin conceived the process of biological evolution through natural selection, claiming that evolutionary change occurred slowly over long periods of time. The fossil record, however, says otherwise. Species remain in relatively stable arrangements for eons of time until a discontinuity, such as a meteor or an ice age, intervenes, at which time many of the species disappear and new ones appear quite suddenly. Change, therefore, does not proceed smoothly. Rather, it lurches forward in spurts, separated by periods of relative calm and stability. You or your organization may be in a spurt right now. If so, you are in for quite a ride. The shape of discontinuous change is not what we expect. Most of us are familiar with the picture of linear change. We studied that in school. Biologists and business people are familiar with exponential change because that is the way populations and investments grow, you hope. We also run into another form of change that is commonly called the law of diminishing returns. And finally, cyclic change moves back and forth from one extreme to another. Political analysts are quite familiar with that form of change. None of those pictures, however, capture transformational change. For that, we use an S-curve, a curve that looks like an elongated S. The S-curve has three phases. The run-up is the end of the old equilibrium period, dominated by incremental small changes. The takeoff is the period of rapid change, and the leveling off is the beginning of the new equilibrium period. Very different from the old in important ways. S-curves are the punctuation marks between eras. A good example of eras and their effect is the history of transportation. At first, we only had foot power to move us around the earth. Domesticated animals, wheeled vehicles, sailing ships, motorized vehicles, flying vehicles, and spacecraft all allowed us to move faster. Each one, however, had a built-in limit on how fast it could go. Even the winner of the Tour de France, a bicycle race, could not outrun the oldest automobile, and by the same token, the fastest automobile will never go as fast as a jet plane. In order to get significantly higher performance from an established technology, one has to abandon the old system and get on with the new. Joel Barker, a noted futurist, tells the story of the Swiss manufacturers who, in 1968, held 90% of the world's watch market. In that year, they also invented the quartz electronic watch, but did not realize that they were about to launch a transformation. Seiko and Texas Instruments adopted that technology and together transformed the watch industry, robbing the Swiss of their overwhelming advantage. The mechanical watch was much better than the sundial, but it was no match for the digital watch in accuracy and functionality. Your organization or industry may be in an old era right now. You might ask yourself, when did that era begin? What was the event that triggered it? And even more importantly, how might that era end? What potential events or inventions could signal the arrival of another transformational change? Events like the fall of the Soviet Union, the Asian and Brazilian currency crises, and the arrival of the Internet mark the beginning of some recent eras. The problem with eras is not that they change. We can all adapt to change. It is that they change so rapidly. And as we will see, getting from one era to the next is no easy task. Imagine you are a premier bicycle maker at the beginning of this century. You have heard about the motor car, but you discount its effect. It's noisy, it breaks down all the time, it needs fuel, and it's expensive. You can think of a million reasons why the new technology will not overtake the old. But of course you would be wrong, as we know from history. Getting from the old era to the new involves leaving what has worked in the past and betting on the arrival of the new era in time to be successful. The decision to abandon the current regime in favor of the new one involves a great deal of risk and uncertainty in the rewards. One element is for certain, however. You will surely fail if you do not change rapidly enough to enter the new era. People make the transition into the new era in different ways. Some wait until it is too late. They are what we call the over my dead body school. Others make the transition too soon. They want to blow up the old system right now and start over, losing any value left in the old system immediately. The right way, of course, is not too soon and not too late. Organizations should take care in timing their transition to the new era. One more digression before we look at the role of vision in the global economy, this time into the nature of vision itself. The term comes from the root to see, in this case, to see into the future. Of course, we cannot physically see the future, but with our mind's eye, we can imagine what the future might be. Traditional forecasts also describe what the future might be, but in a much different way. Forecasts are generally based on data drawn from past and present sources. They extrapolate that data into the future, foretelling what will be, bigger or smaller, more popular or less, farther away or closer, but they are limited to the future of the current era, the result of incremental change. They cannot transcend the boundary of transformation into the next era because the transformation involves something new, and nothing new can come from the analysis of past and present data. For that, one must use imagination. Imagination is the ability to create images of different futures that are not completely based on past and present experience. It goes beyond experience to see and communicate something entirely different. The role of vision in the global economy, then, is obvious. Visionaries are those who see past the current transformation into the world that will exist once the new era begins. Their vision is absolutely necessary if we are to have any idea at all what awaits us once the global economy comes in full force. They are the lookouts, those men who sat atop the masts of the old sailing ships. Because of where they stood, they saw the horizon first, before the captain, before the crew. They first saw land or storms or other ships. They saw the future before anyone else on the ship. But vision plays a second crucial role in the global economy. Remember how the transition from one era to the other is never smooth. One has to abandon what is known and familiar and strike out for what is unknown and perhaps frightening. Explorers did that in coming to our continent 500 years ago. Families did it, moving from the coasts to settle the interiors. Well, today there are few physical frontiers, but there are plenty of other frontiers. One of these is the new electronic economy that is powered by the forces of electronic communication. The new age is the age of intangibility. All previous technologies allowed us to do more with physical material things, with food, energy, goods, and transportation. The new technology is quite different in that it separates information and other intangible commodities from their material basis. Information used to be tied to paper, money to currency, and education to books and buildings. Now the intangible parts of these transactions are taking flight. Reducing themselves to the flow of digital information around the globe, they are now present everywhere simultaneously. Members of the younger generation have access to the new technology, and they understand the new age better than we do. They see the power of media, of communication, and of information. Our generation's proudest achievements were in creating tangible monuments such as skyscrapers, supertankers, and jet transports. Members of the younger generation are playing with intangible things like bots, agents that do work on the web, MP3 files, digitally encoded music, and video games, and artificial reality that lives inside a computer. They are the masters of speed, flexibility, and interactivity, and they will rule the world someday with their skills. They will inherit our world, one that we built up with such painstaking skill, and they will tear down much of it, much of the heavy material stuff, and replace it with cyber reality. If you don't like this description of the future, or this vision of reality, you are not alone. But that is not the point, because we must move on. How do we encourage people to take the plunge? The answer simply is vision. Vision is not only an imaginative description of a transformed future, it also conveys strong feelings. The vision I just described may awaken feelings of dislike and distrust. It may alternately carry more positive feelings. Those positive and attractive feelings are absolutely necessary for people to move toward the vision. Remember that implementing the vision means, at least partially, to abandon the familiar, the tried and true, the previously successful. And the more successful individuals or organizations have been, the less likely they are to leave that path and strike out in a new direction that is not nearly so secure. General Motors did not introduce small cars in the United States in the 1970s before the Japanese did. IBM was reluctant to abandon its mainframe business in the 1980s to support the PC, and Microsoft was late in getting to the Internet. So, to counterbalance the inertia of the past An imaginative vision must be made attractive and compelling. People must feel drawn to it, almost beyond their control. Even though it may sound incredible, they say, we can do this. It's going to be great. We will climb impossible mountains. Of course, not everyone adopts the vision at the same time. It begins with a small group who sometimes are not even the recognized leaders of the organization, and it spreads as their enthusiasm and success become apparent to others. The vision gives us an idea of what the future of the global economy will be like. It helps guide us toward that vision. The vision compels us to move in its direction. It is positive, motivating, exciting, and it provides meaning to our life. The vision also plays a third crucial role in the global economy. The global economy is fast. Thomas Friedman, in his book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, calls it the difference between the swift and the dead. Speed is essential. People will have to make decisions rapidly without the time to consult with the traditional chain of command. The global economy is large, with members of the same organization dispersed throughout the world. Offices and factories where people congregate to talk, to discuss, to decide, and to work together will be replaced. People will have to act on their own in widely dispersed locations and adjusting their decisions to local conditions and circumstances. How will employees know what to do in the absence of rules, procedures, and decisions by their superiors? Here comes the vision again. If they are committed to achieving their shared vision and using their natural talents in an honest attempt to achieve it, they will do the right thing most of the time. And even though they make a mistake once in a while, they will be errors of commission by being a little bit too aggressive perhaps, rather than errors of omission by waiting for someone else to decide what to do. You can learn from errors of commission. Errors of omission are just opportunities lost. A vision binds people in a dispersed organization together and encourages them to work towards the same goals without the necessity of communication or interaction. One of the greatest examples of the power of a dispersed vision was the founding of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, 450 years ago by Ignatius of Loyola. The society was founded as a religious order, crucially different from other religious orders. All religious orders before that time were monastic. The members of the Benedictines, the Dominicans, and the Franciscans lived, worked, and died in the same monastery. Good order was a matter of following the rules and doing what everybody else did. Ignatius realized, as valuable as those orders had been to the Catholic Church for hundreds of years, that the Church needed a new type of order for the new world of the Renaissance and Reformation. It needed an order of men that were in the world, preaching and teaching where people were. The success of the Society of Jesus is well known. It launched such legendary figures as Francis Xavier, who worked his way around Africa, through India, and to the doors of China, and Matteo Ricci, who penetrated the Middle Kingdom and integrated two great cultures. None of these men could communicate with the central authority very often, if at all. Having accepted the vision of Ignatius, however, they were able to do marvelous deeds towards the same goals while being worlds apart. The ideal global organization of the future consists of people dispersed around the world, communicating instantaneously and simultaneously through the new media, making decisions and taking actions independently while still working together towards the same goal. This image is in fact a vision itself, a compelling picture of an ideal world of the future that can motivate people. It may even motivate you to pursue your vision and to share that pursuit with those around you. Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, once said, "Never underestimate the power of a small group of people to change the world. In fact, that is always the way it happens. That, my friends, is the power of vision.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Let's go now to Module 2, in which Mr. Hoffmann will discuss the challenges of and the barriers to creating visions, such as the programming to which we have all been subject.
I'd like to thank Peter Bishop for his compelling insights into the power of vision. Are we ready for that next era? Are our people ready? Are our companies ready? Quote, managers are people who do things right. Leaders are people who do the right things. The difference may be summarized as activities of vision and judgment. Effectiveness versus activities of mastering routine's efficiency, unquote. So write Warren Bennis and Bert Nannis in their book, Leaders. In many ways, identifying and sharing a vision for an organization is the most fundamental aspect of leadership. Quote, without a vision, writes Dr. Rob Cook, it is impossible for those in leadership positions to move their organizations in a meaningful direction, unquote. During ITC video conferences I've participated in over the past 6 years, I have discussed various attributes and characteristics of visioning leaders and the significance of vision and its role in organizations. This year, I would like to focus on some of the challenges of, or barriers to, creating visions, the methods we can use to create visions, and a possible way to translate them into action within our organizations. First, let's reframe the key elements of a vision. Leadership experts Jim Kouzes and Ed Posner, in their work, The Leadership Challenge, write about the meaning of vision. Paraphrasing their comments, they prefer to use the word vision because it connotes seeing. It evokes images and pictures. It suggests a future orientation, an image of a desired state. And it implies an ideal which is unique in nature. Briefly, the key characteristics are visual, future, ideal, and unique. You will recall from previous broadcasts that intuition is the source of vision. It has been said that intuition is the mother of vision. Dr. Roger Frantz will address the role and challenges of intuition in determining vision in the next segment. As I work with companies, I become more and more convinced that the most fundamental challenge in creating a vision is understanding how one's current condition of mind affects one's thinking. Namely, how over time we have programmed the way our mind experiences and understands the world around us. I suggest the word programmed because at one time we made choices about how we think about a particular subject, how we understand it. However, over time we have adopted an understanding or programmed that way of thinking as an assumption of reality. Our assumptions block our minds from seeing other possibilities and leave us unable to make different choices. The challenge of our assumptions present in creating visions is one of limitation. If you are unaware of your assumptions while envisioning the future, the options for the future direction will be limited. Leaders who do not understand their condition of mind will not be open to the opportunities, no matter how exciting or how potentially profitable they may be. For example, When IBM, which had built its strategy on the vision of centralized processing, was faced with the introduction of distributed computing processors, it could not envision the possibility of distributed computing being a challenge in the marketplace. That assumption forever changed IBM. A second challenge we face in creating visions is understanding how to manage our perceptions of fear and risk. Creating a vision requires us to place ourselves into the future, into a place or position we do not yet know, or toward which we do not understand how to move. Generally, as we move from the known to the unknown, we feel an increase in perceived risk. If the level of risk is perceived to be one of danger, the level of accompanying fear may be high to extremely high. If perceived to be too intense, our fear limits our ability to explore those possibilities which may be personally challenging. Each of us functions within our own parameters of fear and risk. The challenge related to vision is first recognizing when our own fear is impeding possibilities from being considered, and second, allowing ourselves to be influenced by others who may not be as challenged by the unknown. For example, some of you may have had the opportunity of participating in a challenge course event with colleagues. Challenge courses include activities such as the high wire walk, or climbing the wall, etc. Recently, I participated with a group in an event called the Quantum Leap. The event requires you to climb a freestanding 25-foot telephone pole, which has an unstable 12-inch wooden disc on top, stand up, enjoy the view, if you can, and jump off. Sounded simple enough. The guide articulated his vision of what we would experience. With great enthusiasm, he described how exhilarated we would feel standing free in the morning breeze on top of the pole, looking at the beautiful mountains in the west and down the desert valley in the south, celebrating a triumphant sense of accomplishment. And then the moment of freedom, stepping off the disc into thin air. He was painting the vision using the key elements I explained earlier: image, future, ideal, and unique. What do you think we as participants were envisioning? We were a group of 7. Each of us was creating our own image based on our perceived level of risk and fear. For some, the possibility of reaching the top was impossible. For others, it was a little risky, but it looked like fun. And for one, this was going to be a been there, done that, no big deal type of experience. 5 of the 7 people made it to the top. For those of you who are not familiar with this type of activity, the actual danger in the event is very low. You are in a harness, and under the other members of the team belay. The point is that it doesn't matter how safe it is. It's our perception, fear, and risk that we must deal with if we want to remain open to the possibilities. Are you wondering whether I completed the exercise? I'll tell you later, and it will be the truth. A third challenge in creating a vision is exhibited in the form of practicality. A group that specializes in meeting management and meeting effectiveness from Boston, called Synectics, did a lot of research around ideation during meetings. They originated the concept of the practicality filter in the 1980s. As we grow in our business careers and develop a sense of what works, what we can expect to get accomplished, and what is practical, when we are about to offer one of our ideas or hear the ideas of others, our practicality filter kicks in and rejects those ideas that we sense simply won't work. I'm not advocating eliminating your practicality filters from everyday work, but I suggest that you set aside your practicality filter when you are involved in creating visions and when you are generating ideas for problem-solving activities. For example,